Good morning and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Bhante Suddhāso, and this morning I'll be talking about a short discourse of the Buddha from the Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 8, sutta number 13. So I'll start by giving homage to the Buddha, reciting the verse of homage to the Buddha, and then I'll read through the sutta and give some explanations. And then if there's any questions, I'll take questions at the end, so feel free to type in questions at any time. Starting with homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. So this morning we're looking at Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 8, sutta number 13, the Assājānīyasutta, or one of the many suttas with this name. There's actually several suttas which are called Assājānīya. The word Assājānīya means a thoroughbred horse. A well-bred horse. And the Buddha very often in the suttas uses metaphors related to horse training as a way of demonstrating Buddhist practice. And I find this really important already, just to point this out, that throughout the suttas, when the Buddha is talking about Buddhist training, the imagery and metaphors that he's often using are of animal training. So horses are common, but he also gives examples of training other kinds of animals as well. And this is important because often when we relate to the training of our own mind, we think of ourselves as intelligent, sensible, clever people, humans, and therefore we expect that we can just tell ourselves to behave properly, and we will. We think we can just tell ourselves to think and act in accordance with Dhamma, and we will. But in reality, that's about as effective as telling a horse or a dog to think and act and speak and behave in accordance with Dhamma. So how do you train animals? You train animals in much more direct, persistent ways with the expectation that they're not going to understand what we're teaching them intellectually or logically or rationally, but rather that through ongoing persistent training, the animal's behavior will gradually start to change. And eventually, you have a well-trained animal, but it takes as long as it takes, and it usually takes quite some time. So it's the same with training our own mind, training our own speech, training our own actions. Again, it's not sufficient just to learn the Dhamma concepts and understand them intellectually, but it's necessary to constantly train ourselves the same way that you would train a horse or a dog or an elephant or something like that. So again, this is one of the many places where the Buddha uses horse training as an example of how to train ourselves in the Dhamma. So I'll start reading through the discourse. So again, this is Anguttara Nikaya 8.13, Assājānīyasutta. And I'm reading here from Bhante Suddhāso's translation on Sutta Central, but I'll be adjusting it a little bit as I go along. So the Buddha begins, he says, "Monks, a fine royal thoroughbred horse with 8 factors is worthy of a king, fit to serve a king, and considered a factor of kingship." What 8? It's when a fine royal thoroughbred horse is well born on both the mother's and the father's side. It is bred in the region that fine thoroughbred horses come from. Whatever food it's given, whether fresh or dry, it eats the food carefully without making a mess. It is disgusted by sitting or lying down in excrement or urine. It is gentle and pleasant to live with. It does not upset the other horses. It openly shows its tricks, bluffs, ruses, and feints to its trainer, so the trainer can try to subdue them. And it carries its load, determining whether or not the other horses carry their loads, I will carry mine. It always walks in a straight path, and it is strong and stays strong even until death. A fine royal thoroughbred horse with these 8 factors is worthy of a king. So this is the introduction here, the opening of the metaphor. Here the Buddha is talking about horse training. So something which would have been very familiar to people. So these days, horse training is not particularly common. Horses had become a bit of a specialty item, whereas up until 100 years or so ago, horses were everywhere. Horses were an ordinary feature of everyday life, and therefore people, it was widespread knowledge what a good horse was and how to train a horse and proper ways to treat a horse and how to identify good horses and not so good horses. So this description the Buddha gave here of a fine thoroughbred horse, a really top quality horse, this is something which people would have already been familiar with and already recognized. So then the Buddha gives the metaphor here, comparing it to monks. He says, in the same way, a monk with 8 qualities is worthy of offerings dedicated to the gods, worthy of hospitality, worthy of a religious donation, worthy of greeting with joined palms, that's Anjali, and is the supreme field of merit for the world. So those who are familiar with Buddhist chanting will recognize this. So worthy of offerings, worthy of hospitality, etc., is in the standard recollection of the Sangha as Ahuneyo, Pahuneyo, Dakineyo, Anjali Karaniyo, Anutarang Punya Ketang Lokasa. That's standard recollection. So what is it that makes a monk worthy of offerings, hospitality, donations, respect, and supreme field of merit? Well, the Buddha says, first off, he says, it's when a monk is moral, restrained according to the monastic rules, conducting themselves well, and going in suitable places, seeing danger in the slightest fault, they keep the training rules that they have committed to. So this is the first one. So again, this lines up with the description of the principles of the good horse. So the good horse is, again, well-born and from the region that good horses are born in. So that here is being analogized to morality. So how is this? It's because ultimately our Buddhist practice is born from our morality. Morality is always the first step. It's the critical birthplace of a good Buddhist practice. Without a strong foundation in morality, then Buddhist practice is not stable and strong. But with a solid foundation in morality, then we create the conditions for our practice to arise, for our practice to develop appropriately. So the imagery of the well-born horse from a good region is analogized here to a monk who is well-grounded in morality, whose practice is arising from a solid basis of morality. And just a few comments on the translation here. So, Iribikve bhikkhu silava hoti. So it's when a monk, a bhikkhu, is moral, so they have sila. Patimokkha sangvara sangvuto viharati. So they dwell restrained according to the patimokkha, according to the monastic rules. Of course, the patimokkha is a very long and complex document, which includes a lot of training methods for helping one to live a good monastic life. For lay people, the critical thing is simply following the 5 precepts, but following the 5 precepts with diligence and persistence, and also following the Noble Eightfold Path, which contains a further set of refined trainings on morality and conduct. Then the next one is achara gochara sampanno. So this means being endowed with good conduct and also going in appropriate places. So gochara means one's pasture, one's domain, one's territory. So this means that one avoids going to dangerous places, dangerous not necessarily in a physical sense, but places which are full of temptation or full of things which might distract us from our spiritual practice or things which might encourage unwholesome mind states, we avoid going to places like that. So for example, you won't normally see Buddhist monks in nightclubs. You won't normally see them in bars. You won't normally see them in brothels. You won't normally see them in movie theaters. You won't normally see them in places where the mind is going to be subject to inflammation, where the mind is going to be subject to inflammation by unwholesome qualities or temptations. So the translation here translates that as resorting for alms in suitable places, which I think is too inferential. The word gochara here doesn't necessarily imply only the act of going for alms. It's just anywhere that you go, anywhere that you travel in or spend time in. And seeing danger in the slightest fault. So again, this means that we recognize the importance of keeping our morality, recognizing that even small breaches of morality are problematic. So things like white lies. A white lie is still a lie. It's a breach of morality. Or doing something that's only slightly harmful. Well, we still want to avoid causing any harm at all if we can help it. And so again, they keep the rules that they've undertaken. So for lay people, you thoroughly commit to the 5 precepts. If one is entering monastic life, then it's 8 precepts and then 10 precepts for the novices. And then when one becomes fully ordained, then one has again, much more long and complex code of conduct that we use as a way of training our own mind. Then the second one, so just as the horse carefully eats whatever food they're given, whether it's fresh or dry, in the same way, the Buddha says, a monk eats whatever food they're given, whether coarse or fine. They eat it carefully without being bothered. So this also is an important point. So in monastic life, we rely upon donations of food. And so sometimes we're given food that we like and sometimes food that we don't like. Sometimes we're given high quality food and sometimes low quality food. Sometimes we're given well-balanced nutritional offerings and sometimes not. Sometimes it's very limited. I've had many times where I went for alms round and the only thing I received was a few pieces of bread and nothing else. And it's like, well, okay, today I'm eating only bread. Okay, I can live with that. No problem. Or sometimes we get food offered that we really don't like the flavor of. Well, okay. Then we practice equanimity. We practice not being bothered. Whatever's offered, we practice accepting it with gratitude and not being bothered by the quality or the flavor of it. That said, in the monastic rules, the Buddha does give a number of exceptions for cases of illness or severe nutritional deficiency or things like food allergies would also fit under this. So the Buddha also was compassionate in giving us ways of acquiring food that's necessary for our health or our medical conditions. But the general practice is still whatever food we receive, we are grateful to have food, and we train the mind in equanimity and contentment with whatever we receive. And then the next one is that just as the good horse is disgusted by sitting or lying down in excrement or urine. So a good horse doesn't want to foul themselves with excrement. In the same way, he says, a good monk is disgusted with misconduct by body, speech, or mind, and by the attainment of any kind of unwholesome things. So again, this is important. So when we are committed to training the mind, when we're committed to practicing morality and cultivating purity of heart, then we want to recognize that any kind of misconduct, so physical misconduct, so doing anything unwholesome or immoral with our body, verbal misconduct, so speaking in ways that are immoral, inappropriate, harmful, and even mental misconduct, so cultivating unwholesome mind states of greed, hatred, and delusion. We want to see all of these as being just as disgusting as lying down in excrement. Of course, nobody wants to lie down in a pile of excrement, generally speaking. So we should see the unwholesome actions of body, speech, and unwholesome mind states. We should see them the same way. So if we catch ourselves cultivating unwholesome mind states, we should recognize, oh, this is just like a horse lying down in a puddle of urine, or lying down in a pile of excrement. It's something that we should be trying to avoid. And the same with any kind of unwholesome activity or unwholesome attitude. We recognize, oh, that's foul. It's something that we want to avoid fouling ourselves with. And then just as the good horse, the next one, just as the good horse is gentle and pleasant to live with and doesn't upset the other horses, he says in the same way a good monk is gentle and pleasant to live with and does not upset the other monks. So this one is also important. Elsewhere in the suttas, the Buddha uses the lovely imagery of saying that when living together, we should do acts of loving kindness, both openly and privately, and always look at each other with loving eyes. So cultivating this attitude of trying to be gentle and pleasant to live with and treating our fellow resident monks with kindness and respect and appreciation. And next, just as the horse shows all of its tricks, bluffs, ruses, and feints to its trainer so the trainer can try to subdue them, in the same way, a good monk shows all of their tricks, bluffs, ruses, and feints to their sensible spiritual companions, so their companions can try to subdue them. So this also is the aspect of honesty and transparency in our spiritual practice. It's recognizing that while we're trying to train ourselves, we're naturally going to be constantly reverting to our old unwholesome habits. We're going to constantly be falling back in our old non-Dhamma ways of thinking and speaking and acting. And we want to try to purify ourselves of those unwholesome tendencies and habits. And one of the reasons why we practice together with other people is because other people can observe our faults and point them out to us. They can observe all our faults and offer advice for how to overcome them, or offer support in our training to overcome those faults. But that depends upon honesty and transparency. So first off, honesty with ourselves, being honest with ourselves about what we're doing, being honest with ourselves about what's going on in our mind, honest with ourselves about what's unwholesome and what is not in accordance with Dhamma and what is going to be an obstacle to awakening. And then honesty and transparency with our spiritual companions. So letting our spiritual companions see our faults, being honest and revealing to them, telling them what our problems are, what our difficulties are, and asking for advice, requesting assistance in teaching the mind to overcome these problematic tendencies. So that then we can receive the support of others, which makes it much easier to purify the heart and mind. Then the next one here, so just as the good horse carries its load with the determination, whether or not the other horses carry their loads, I will still carry mine. He says in the same way, a good monk does their training with the thought, whether or not the other monks do their training, I will do mine. So in other words, we recognize that ultimately our practice and development is our own personal responsibility. It's up to us to commit ourselves to the Dhamma practices. And sometimes we're around other monks who just aren't practicing very well, or at least it looks like they're not practicing very well. But ultimately, we need to recognize that we can't use that as an excuse to neglect our own practice. Because if we neglect our own practice, then we will suffer. And just because other monks aren't keeping the practices as well as we are, well, that's their problem. They need to figure out what they're going to do about that. But even if the other monks aren't practicing well, we still need to commit to practicing well ourselves. So this does come up often. So for lay people, maybe you're hanging out with your other Dhamma friends and you know they're Buddhist, but even though you're all Buddhist and theoretically following the 5 precepts, you're like, well, my friends, they drink once in a while, they have alcohol every now and then. I guess I'll do it too. It's okay. I mean, they're not following the precept. I guess it's okay if I don't follow it either. And so the Buddha is saying here, actually, that's not the right attitude. The right attitude is to think, Whether or not the others are doing the training, I will do the training. Whether or not the others are following the precepts, I will follow the precepts. Whether or not the others are doing the meditation, I will do meditation. Whether or not the others are studying the suttas, I will study the suttas. So not using the shortcomings of other people as an excuse to then cut short our own practice as well. But rather, we want to always be thoroughly committed to Dhamma practice, whether the people around us are committed or not. Then similarly, so it says, just as the horse always walks in a straight path, it says, the monk always walks in a straight path. And there's a bit of a double meaning here in the Pali. So the Pali word is uju magga. So uju can mean straight or direct. It also has the meaning of upright. And magga, it does literally mean path, but magga is commonly used to mean spiritual path. So uju magga means the upright spiritual path, the direct spiritual path, which leads directly to awakening. So always walking the straight path means always being committed to the upright, direct path that leads to awakening. So always having a morally upright and firm determination to one's spiritual practice, to the path that leads to awakening. And the Buddha clarifies, he says, here the straight path is, then he gives the Noble Eightfold Path: right view, right attitude, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, right samadhi. So Samma Ditti, Samma Sankappo, Samma Vacha, Samma Kammanto, Samma Ajivo, Samma Vayamo, Samma Sati, and Samma Samadhi. So this is the straight path, the upright path, the direct path that leads all the way to full awakening. And then just as the good horse is strong and stays strong even until its death, the Buddha says in the same way, the good monk is courageous, they're heroic, with the attitude of, I will willingly let my skin, sinews, and bones remain as the blood and flesh waste away. I will not stop trying until I have achieved what is possible by human strength, energy, and vigor. So this is the attitude of our practice. The attitude of our practice is that we will commit ourselves. So with courage and heroic dedication, we will commit ourselves to keep practicing with sincerity and diligence right up until the point of our death. So not slacking off in our practice, but always being firmly committed. And the Buddha, again, he reiterates, a monk with these 8 qualities is worthy of offerings, hospitality, religious donations, veneration with joint palms, and is a supreme field of merit for the world. So that's the end of the sutta. We can respect the sutta with 3 sadhus, and then I'll see if there's any questions. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, and hello to the people checking in online. Hello to Manuel, Gregory, Maria, Madeline, Kay, Richard, Monkol, and Jody. Hello to all of you. And we have one question here. So canine trainer LK, which is very appropriate since, as I said, the Buddha commonly used metaphors of training animals, especially horses and dogs. He commonly used the imagery of training animals as metaphors for Buddhist practice. So I'm happy that you're a canine trainer, because maybe that will give you some insight in how to practice Buddhism. Practice Buddhism the same way you train your dogs, and you'll probably get good results that way. So train yourself as though you are one of your dogs, and you'll make swift progress. So canine trainer LK says, I'd like to know what book you are reading from. I'd like to purchase it and learn the life of the Buddha. So I'm actually reading from Bhante Suddhāso's translation of the Anguttara Nikaya, and it's all freely available on suttacentral.net. So I'll put that in the comments window here, suttacentral.net, which is a repository for free translations of the Buddhist discourses And you can also get the books sent to you in hard copy. So on the website there, you can find out, again, the books themselves are free, but I think you might need to pay for the publishing and shipping, like the printing and shipping of it. I'm not sure. But the books themselves are freely available online. And Canine Trainer LK says, yes, I learned to train my mind as one of my dogs. Good. Yes, that will make swift progress for you. Excellent. And then Madeline, so Madeline, this is a little bit off topic, so maybe better if you bring this question to Monk Chat this evening. So at 7:30 p.m. New York time this evening, we'll have our usual Monk Chat where you can ask all the questions you want on any topic. But for now, we're just looking at questions related to this sutta. So, and that looks like the last question. So again, you're welcome to come and join the Monk Chat this evening, our live stream Q&A session every Friday evening. And if you're in the area, there's also our Saturday evening meditation in person at the monastery, and then Sunday all day. So if you're in the area, feel free to come to those as well. So for now, we can conclude the session with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you all next time.